Waheguਰੂ Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguਰੂ Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Gursant Singh, and today I am reporting on the webinar that took place today that 3HO heads hosted. Now, this webinar took place a few hours ago, and I attended it. And it was very interesting what transpired during the webinar. It wasn't so much about the very corporate narrative that the 3HO heads are putting forth in response to these allegations or accounts of Yogi Bhajan's abuse towards his students. It wasn't so much about what they said about that, but it was more about how they delivered this and the subtle statements that they made. It was, as I said, delivered in a very corporate manner, very synthesized, if you will, and kind of a fake face they put to their presentation, in my mind. You can listen to it. I've put it here for you all to watch in the video that I'm making here, so you can watch it and see what you think. Now, the takeaways that I had from it was very interesting, was how they are talking about this Philip Dislep's very good research into the true history of Yogi Bhajan's Kundalini Yoga. There are several questions that were brought up about the lies and the frauds that Yogi Bhajan perpetrated in presenting and teaching his Kundalini and Tantric yoga. And so this Philip Dislep's research came up. And it was interesting to note how they sort of just went around in circles around it and didn't really address the issue directly. I think they're really trying to distract people from the real issues here. Yogi Bhajan was a fraud and lied and really caused a lot of damage to people, both financially, emotionally, and spiritually, with all of his lies and corrupt teachings. I've talked about this in many videos already. But what's interesting from this webinar, I've concluded that these 3HO heads like this Prit Palkar are just using this so-called listening tour as a way to try to distract from the real issues. And I think they want to just put up this smoke screen so that they can continue their control and power over 3HO. This is a lot of money for them. I've mentioned before in other videos how I've looked at their nonprofit tax returns, and these people are getting pretty hefty salaries. This Prit Palkar, I believe she gets about $5,000 or $6,000 a month. The head of KRI, this Nirvair Singh, I think he makes about $100,000 a year, as I remember from the tax returns. This Gurmastik, who runs SikhNet, which is all part of this Yogi Bhajan empire, he takes in $90,000 a year. There are other people in the organizations that take in money as well. So they don't want to let go of this power, that's for sure. And so like I said, I put this entire webinar for you to review. It's an hour long. At the end of this presentation I'm making here, this commentary. Now, I want to point out how I have been criticizing 3HO and Yogi Bhajan now for over 10 years. And I want to show you some of the letters that I received from people like Preet Palkar that are in power, positions of power in 3HO and the other organizations. And so I remain very skeptical that they will do something more than just giving lip service to this idea of letting people listen. I remain very, very skeptical. Here you can see this is this Palkar, and that's of course Yogi Bhajan over there with a fur coat. Now they did talk about, like I said, this Philip Dislep's research, and I encourage you all to read his academic study, Maharaj Naman Tantric, and to view the videos that Philip Dislep has made recently. They're very good and very insightful into the true history of Yogi Bhajan. Now, Philip, just in a nutshell, as far as I read his study, concludes that Yogi Bhajan lied about the origins of his Kundalini Yoga. He basically copied and pasted some yoga exercises from other swamis and yogis, and then threw in many of his own mantras, made up mantras and kriyas into this whole practice that he called Kundalini Yoga. That's what Yogi Bhajan basically did in a nutshell. And so this has caused a lot of alarm. It was very disturbing to me when I discovered it. This was about 2009 when I read Sikhism and Tantric Yoga, which was an excellent book presented by a Sikh scholar, Dr. Gursant Singh, who first published this book in 1977. And Philip Dislep refers to this book in his research as well. And Dr. Gursant Singh points out that Yogi Bhajan used the Sikh religion, appropriated the Sikh religion, and he twisted it. He twisted the teachings of it and used it for his own means to promote and give credibility to his Kundalini and Tantric Yoga. The biggest issue that I have with Yogi Bhajan's teachings is that he not only lied about all of these kriyas being ancient and coming from ancient sources, he said that his Kundalini Yoga came from the Sikh Gurus, which is a complete lie. There's no evidence at all that the Sikh Gurus ever practiced yoga of any kind, let alone Yogi Bhajan's Kundalini Yoga. But Yogi Bhajan had the gall and the disrespect and for Sikhi to claim that Guru Nanak was a yogi and that he passed on to his son Baba Siri Chand and then passed on to Guru Ram Das Ji, the fourth Sikh Guru, this Kundalini Yoga, and then Guru Ram Das Ji passed off to Yogi Bhajan in a secret vision. Only Yogi Bhajan supposedly had, that this Kundalini Yoga would save the world and that the Sikhs in the West would rise up and save the entire world. This is complete nonsense. It's an affront to traditional Sikhs, and it's just a complete lie. It only comes from the big fat mouth of Yogi Bhajan, this completely fabricated story. And so Philip Dislepp does a really good academic study and research into all of this. And so when I hear this Pritpalkar and these other 3HO people say that they are going to listen to people like me and others, I just, I find it hard to believe. I'm very, very skeptical. They blocked me in this last webinar. I couldn't see anybody else's questions, and they had this Q&A on Zoom. So I posted my question, and they never answered the question. They didn't even acknowledge that I had written a question. So they were reading, you'll see in the webinar posted there, how they've answered other people's questions and they read them out, but I couldn't see them. And they, like I said, didn't answer my question either. I'm sure other people who are on the webinar couldn't see my question either. So this shows me that they are just getting lip service to the idea of listening to people. That's my take on it. Here's another screenshot of Philip Dislepp's manuscript on the history of Yogi Bhajan and 3HO. Talks about many of the interviews that Philip Dislepp did with former students of Yogi Bhajan, and it's very well researched. And these two videos that Philip Dislepp is in are very good as well. They're interviews with him, and they were done by this Sikh book club, UKPHA. Like I said, and I'll put links to these videos so you can review them. I highly recommend you watch them. Now, this is another really good article that was published in 2015. And it gives really the history and background of how Yogi Bhajan propagated these lies and frauds in order to give his Kundalini Tantric Yoga credibility. It's shown now that Yogi Bhajan attached himself and his group to a 500-year-old religion, the Sikh religion, in order to avoid being called a cult, a New Age cult. He avoided a lot of criticism from people who criticize cults by trying to attach himself to the Sikh faith, and made it this whole narrative about how his teachings aligned with the Sikh faith, which they do not. So this is something that is all coming out now. And we really need to continue to put pressure on these 3HO heads to examine this research and to acknowledge it, to acknowledge these truths that are coming out. This is what our task is here as people of consciousness and people of truth. So this is a screenshot of the front of Dr. Gursant Singh's book, Sikhism and Tantric Yoga. I got one of the last copies in 2009, and I felt so strongly about it that I spent weeks in front of a text editor where I scanned every single page and edited a lot of the grammar and spelling mistakes, and then put it on the internet as a PDF. And you can download it for free at my website, gurmukyoga.com. I've had it on there for 11 years now, 10 years, I guess. And I've had thousands and thousands of people download this book. It's a very important work. And like I said, it was just an eye-opener for me, this book. And oh, by the way, that article that American Yogis distort Sikh scriptures. That I have the entire article at the end of this video. There's screenshots of it. Right now, the website Sikh Free Press is down, so it's probably easier for you just to read it here at the end of this video. That's why I put it up there. And the Sikhism and Tantric Yoga book you can download from my website. Now, I want to point out how for years, these 3HO people, the Yogi Bhajan people, have been saying lies about me, and they have been trying to marginalize me and discount my criticisms and legitimate criticisms and the truths that I've been exposing about Yogi Bhajan and their organizations. A couple of years ago, this Gurmastic, who's the head of SikhNet, and he's the CEO of SikhNet, actually, which is, like I said, one of these Yogi Bhajan organizations. They work hand in glove together, 3HO, Sikh Dharma International, this SikhNet. He put out this defamatory statement. He says here, total lies that Gursant spreads. He's paid to spread this nonsense. And this is a common strategy among people who cannot make a legitimate argument. They'll start attacking the person who's presenting criticisms, legitimate criticisms, with personal attacks. This is not true at all. I have never been paid by anybody. This is a very common strategy. Philip Disleff even talks about in his videos how these same Yogi Bhajan followers accused him of being paid by perceived enemies of Yogi Bhajan to write this manuscript. So I've even filed a lawsuit against this Gurmastic, and it's going through the courts there in New Mexico, a case against him for defamation. I feel very strongly that these 3HO people cannot get away with this anymore. And again, it just really makes me angry that it seems to me that they are just trying to deflect from these real issues by saying that they're listening to people. Well, I think it's just giving lip service to any kind of real reform or any kind of real listening. And here's more letters that were sent to me. This was 11 years ago. This was from this Siri Mukta Singh, who I worked with and knew very well. He just lived down the street. And you can just see how they reacted when I sent out copies to people of this Dr. Trilochan Singh's book, Sikhism and Tantric Yoga. I was just really shocked by their reaction. I guess I shouldn't have been too surprised. I thought everybody would listen to what I had to say and read the book. From what I can tell, most people didn't read it and just accused me of being a slanderer and spreading negativity about Yogi Bhajan. So this is what I've gone through now for the last 11 years or so. And here you can see more. You can stop these this video and read for yourself all of these letters. This is from this Kirpal Singh, who I thought was my friend there in 3HO. And it turns out that they're really I think, under this trance, an attachment to Yogi Bhajan as a cult personality. It's the only thing I can really figure out. I just am really skeptical that they are going to change. That's my take on it. Here's more of this letters. Again, you can stop these and read them for yourselves. I have them printed or published on my website, gurmukyoga.com. I've had them on there for 11 years. People can see how these 3HO people, they call themselves conscious and willing to listen, are rejecting any kind of legitimate criticism. They blocked me and deleted my comments on all of their websites. And again, just in this webinar, they have blocked my questions from anybody else seeing them. They won't answer my questions. They won't let me speak. And I'm sure they're doing this with other people too that are critical. I was actually surprised to see that they even mentioned Philip Deslep's name in this last webinar and mentioned his research. But the way they talked about it, they pretty much discounted it and said, oh, he just kind of looked into the origins of it and didn't really go into depth at all about it, trying to just basically blow off any kind of questions about it. But mark my words, this is not going to go away. They're not going to be able to just continue to discount these criticisms. There's just too many voices out there now. And with Pamela Dyson's book and my book out there, there's just going to be a continued call for investigations and to examination into these lies and frauds of Yogi Bhajan on all levels. You can't just deal with this physical and sexual abuse, although it's horrendous, and it definitely should be dealt with, but you have to deal with all of these other lies and the frauds and abuses financially and emotionally that Yogi Bhajan heaped on his students. It just, it has to be dealt with. Now, this is an interesting comment. This was from Yogi Bhajan's chief of protocol, this Hari Jivan Senior, as we called him. And this was when I first sent out and posted a PDF of Dr. Gursant Singh's book. And he wrote back this remark. He said, "Why would I pursue anything that discredits my teacher, Yogi Bhajan? He gave me more than I ever expected or deserved. For me, he's more than real, and I can't collaborate with those who think otherwise." So this just shows me. This Hari Jivan is a big shot over there in the 3H organizations and everything. I just find it really ironic that now they're saying that they want to listen to people. I just think it's just a smokescreen that they're doing, because these people are what I call hardcore followers. Maybe there's some that might, but certainly these people are in positions of power that have, their whole livelihood and their entire life has been based on following the teachings of Yogi Bhajan. I just don't see them changing or listening to people about criticisms. Here's this Amritkar, and I'm not sure if this is the same Amritkar that is in the webinar. It might be, actually. She says here in this 2010 email, she says that she's the Sikh Dharma Das Fund assistant, Sikh Dharma International Das Fund assistant Amritkar. So I'm not sure if it's the same one that's in the webinar you'll be listening to, but she says, when I sent out the Sikhism and Tantric Yoga book, she says, I find this email quite insulting. It is full of hate and anger and is very negative, and I had to stop reading it because it is so untruthful. May God guide you to the light. The prayers are with you. So this is a letter. We know it's the Das Fund assistant, Sikh Dharma International. I'm not sure if it's the same armored car, but it shows you where they're coming from. And I think the only reason they really put out these listening tour, as they call it, is that they had to show something. Otherwise, it'd be such just an uproar that they would get no donations or anything, any further support from anybody. Anyway, now this email here from Shantikar, who is one of the, well, she's actually position is the PR director, I believe, for 3HO and Sikh Dharma International. She sent this through the ashram secretary over there, Swarunkar, the Sikh Dharma International headquarters. And this was a very hurtful email, in my opinion, and just really, like I said, it was very painful for me to read this when I got it. When I was really sincerely trying to reach out to people in our community. This was 11 years ago, after I'd just gotten back from India and had a horrendous experience over there of being arrested on false charges. And I read this Dr. Trilochan Singh's book and was very impressed by it. And when I sent it to people who I thought were my friends and associates in the community there in 3HO, they completely rejected me and completely rejected any kind of research that I'd done into this and my experiences with Sikhi and Yogi Bhajan. So this Shantikar, she was the site administrator for this Espanola Ashram Ning site, they called it. And I asked her in an email if I could post Dr. Trilochan Singh's book and also some criticisms that I had about hanging Yogi Bhajan's photo and images in the Gurdwara there. I thought it was disrespectful to hang Yogi Bhajan's images and photos in the Espanola Gurdwara, because there should be only the attention on the Siddhi Guru Granth Sahib and not Yogi Bhajan's tantric yoga photos and paintings in there. I also felt like Yogi Bhajan had propagated these frauds and these lies that were brought up in Dr. Trilochan Singh's book, and he just wasn't worthy to have his image posted there. Nobody's image should be posted in the Gurdwara for that matter, let alone somebody who's committed fraud and deceit. So anyway, Shantikar writes here, I received this forwarded email from Swarunkar, Secretary of the Espanola Ashram, regarding the new Ning site. And then she says, we are not interested in being a sounding board for slander against Yogi Bhajan. If you would like an audience who would appreciate your insidious comments, go to Rick Ross' site. So she sarcastically refers me to this Rick Ross site, who's actually posted a lot of good information about Yogi Bhajan's lies and how he's a cult leader and how he had created this cult of personality. Anyways, Shantikar says, there you will find a slew of people interested in your negative dialogue. And she even puts the link to the site. Just shame on her. I was reaching out, this was 11 years ago, like I said, after I had returned from India and met traditional Sikhs and had interactions with them and learned a lot about the true history of Yogi Bhajan and learned a lot about Sikhi. And here she was completely rejecting any kind of discussion or any kind of acknowledgement that I might have something beneficial to contribute to the community. I really want an apology from her and the other people in the community for these kind of letters. That's one of the things I really want as far as from this investigation and these supposed listening tours. So this concludes what I want to talk about in this commentary. And I will be posting, like I said, the entire webinar that 3HO hosted today. And you can view that. Please comment and send me your comments about what you think. I appreciate your time. And until next time, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's about time here. I just want to start by letting you know how this format is going to work. This is a Zoom webinar, which means your voice and your camera are off. You'll only be able to see the panelists. Today we're just going to be doing a presentation to kind of give you an update on what's currently happening with the organizations, and we'll be answering some questions. The way we'll be taking your questions is through the Q&A box. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom panel, there's a button called Q&A. You can use that to type your questions, and that's how we will be taking questions today. So if you're calling in from a phone, you might want to switch over to a computer or just listen as an observer today, because you won't be able to type in through the phone. Do maybe keep your questions until after the presentation in case the presentation answers the questions you have. And otherwise, thank you. I'll hand it over to Satnam Singh to get us started.
Thank you, Satnam. Thank you, Harirai. I think let's go ahead and tune in with the Mangala Charan mantra. Do Adgare Name 3 times. Sit up straight, palms together. Inhale. Adgare Name, Jigadgare Name, Satgare Name, Sri Guru Deve Name, Adgare Name, Jigadgare Name, Satgare Name, Sri Guru Deve Name, Adgare Name, Jigadgare Name, Satgare Name, Sri Guru Deve Name. Good morning. Thank you all for joining this morning. My name is Satnam Singh. I am an attorney in the Office of Dharmic Counsel, which is an office within the Sri Singh Sabha Corporation. Sri Singh Sabha Corporation is the entity that sits at the top of our organizational structure. I'm joined by Amrit Kaur, who's another attorney in the Office of Dharmic Counsel. She's the Chief Dharmic Counsel. We work together. We're going to run through a set of slides that go through the process that the Sri Singh Sabha Corporation has used through the appointment of the collaborative response team to respond to the allegations relating to misconduct by Yogi Bhajan. At the end of our slides, Harirai Kaur will talk a little bit about the listening tour. So I'm going to begin by sharing my screen, and we'll begin the presentation. Give me 1 second. Okay, So this process that we're going to be talking about, really had its inception in January 2020 when a former secretary of Yogi Bhajan self-published a book detailing her experiences with Yogi Bhajan, and those experiences included an alleged sexual relationship that she says she had with Yogi Bhajan. And shortly afterwards, a number of serious allegations by other women were reported on social media and through other means, and that created significant concern throughout our community about these reports of harm and what the organization was going to do about it. Now, out of respect for the values of our collective community, which is a global community, and a commitment to the mission and integrity of our organizations, Serious Inside Corporation decided that it was necessary for the allegations to be addressed. And the initial step in beginning to address the allegations was, as I alluded to, the formation of the collaborative response team, or the CRT. And the CRT is made up of 6 representatives of the nonprofit and for-profit organizations within our umbrella. And it was formed really to provide a time-sensitive response to the escalating crisis. The CRT meets regularly during each week and reports weekly and obtains input from the SSSC to inform its action. So it reports weekly to the SSSC and obtains input from the SSSC regarding its ongoing work and activities. One of the first things that the CRT did was to recommend that SSSC hire a firm to conduct an independent investigation into the allegations, and that's what was done early on. We'll talk more about the firm that's doing the investigation in a few minutes. The CRT launched a website also at the beginning to provide a transparent response and a central point of communication. The web address is ssscresponseteam.org. If you haven't already visited that website, I recommend that you visit it. It contains a lot of information, a lot of additional information than what's being presented today regarding the process. It contains extensive FAQ section responding to questions that have been raised during the process, about the process that CRT is following. And it also contains each communication that the CRT has sent out since it began doing its work. So ssscresponseteam.org. I'll talk for a second about the process that the CRT has used and sort of the principles that it's relied on to respond to the allegations. Number one, acknowledge the allegations, which, again, if you've seen the communications that CRT has issued, or if you visit the website, you'll see how all of these principles have sort of factored into the work of the CRT. But, CRT began by acknowledging the allegations, and in acknowledging, CRT understood that it was important to not retaliate against the accusers, and also not to deny the allegations or offer any defenses before an investigation concluded. The second piece is to investigate the allegations. And importantly, in conducting the investigation, CRT decided that having a professional and neutral third party to do the work was very important. Among other things, it provides trust in the organization, trust that the organization is handling it correctly, and not attempting to handle it in-house where issues of bias may come up. And so an outside third party to do the investigation was considered the best approach. And sort of in addition, sort of along the same lines, be transparent in the process of the investigation. So communicate with our constituents and stakeholders about the process as it unfolds. Also, protecting confidentiality and the identity of witnesses is important, particularly in an investigation dealing with these types of sensitive issues. and then, at the conclusion of the investigation, make the outcome, and in this case, the report that's expected to be generated, public. So the third sort of guiding principle that the CRT has relied on was is the need to act promptly. It's a quickly changing set of circumstances that our organizations are facing, our community is facing, and having a nimble team that can respond, that can be responsive quickly has been important. Communicating often with stakeholders is something the CRT has tried to do, and if you view the communications again, you'll see the efforts that the CRT has made to provide timely communications, and also in acting promptly, providing immediate care and counseling to those who report harm was decided to be a very valuable thing to do in sort of recognition that harm may have occurred, and sort of without judging the outcome of the investigation, but still acknowledging and wanting to be compassionate and caring to those who report harm. So counseling has been made available. So some of the qualities of an independent third-party investigator that the CRT considered and determined to be important. So number one, experience with difficult issues of sexual misconduct, appropriate training in interviewing and evaluating both supporting and refuting evidence, so evidence on either side of the allegations. The demonstrated ability to establish trust with witnesses, particularly important given the subject matter and the sensitivity around it, and experience with the unique issues that may arise in a spiritual-based setting, in particular the unique issues that exist between a spiritual teacher and student. And then there's this point on the left side: an independent investigation by a third party is necessary to provide an unbiased forum for seeking the truth. I touched on that a bit already. And sort of, picking up on the last point. I mean, the focus of this investigation is to get as close as possible to the truth. But the circumstances of the investigation really, have a lot to do with the selection of the investigator. And so in particular, it's not a legal proceeding. And so there's no ability to compel witnesses and evidence. There's no discovery. There's no subpoena power. There's no prosecution, defense. There's no judge. There's no jury. So looking to criminal or civil investigators, sort of like the types of investigators that do fact gathering for purposes of using those facts in some type of judicial or quasi judicial proceeding, didn't seem appropriate, and so CRT decided that looking at those types of investigators would not be the right approach. Similarly, like HR investigators, have a skill set that's relevant to some degree, and so they have experience dealing with harassment in a workplace setting, but not with sexual misconduct in the spiritual community. And so, those types of workplace investigators were also ruled out as not being exactly what we need. So judges and lawyers are often turned to, so retired judges and lawyers, law firms are often often hired to do investigations, but they're also often distrusted and feared, which may discourage witnesses from coming forward. And given the importance of this investigation and this work to our global community, it was felt, CRT felt that it was important that witnesses not be discouraged from coming forward, and so using judges or lawyers was determined to not be consider in thinking about how the investigator was selected is that like no one that was interviewed for this work had done several investigations of this kind. So it's a unique enough and uncommon enough type of situation. You know, it's not unique. It's come up before in other communities, but it remains sufficiently uncommon so that no investigator had done, you know, a bunch of these types of investigations. You know, in evaluating the different types of investigators that might be or that could have been selected, the CRT determined that an olive branch, which is a project of the Zen Center at Pittsburgh, met our critical requirements. So the consultants at an olive branch have advised and counseled 25 organizations experiencing ethical issues. They have performed 5 projects for Buddhist organizations. 2 of those were independent investigations, like what they're doing for our organizations. And 3 of them were listening post processes where they simply provided a place for reporters to share their stories and their reports of harm, you know, without you know, using investigative techniques, without testing for credibility. And those reports of harm that were, or at least in one case, in the case of the Shambhala organization, the reports of harm that were collected during the listening post were ultimately published in a report. You know, lastly, an olive branch was found to possess the critical listening skills needed to respond sensitively and to ask probing questions to assess credibility and motive issues. And so altogether, you know, it's sort of implicit by these slides. You know, altogether, they seem to, or they were found to meet everything that we were looking for, you know, across the board, both in terms of their sort of investigative skill set and also the other pieces that CRT felt were important for this investigation. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Amrikar to pick up the slides here.
So the goal was to have Olive Branch be able to have a complete investigation. And so in an effort to ensure balance in the investigation and full participation, efforts were made throughout the investigative process to make sure that Yogi Bhajan's voice was heard through his students and family. It was the CRT encouraged anyone who had relevant information to contact an olive branch in order to be able to have this balanced investigation. An olive branch has reported it was contacted by close to 300 people who shared information about the allegations. Of those, at least 120 people reported to an olive branch specifically on Yogi Bhajan's behalf. To date, an olive branch has conducted more than 50 interviews specifically to explore his defense to the allegations, and there were numerous written reports that were submitted in support of Yogi Bhajan, which were made part of their investigative record. An olive branch, as Satnam Singh discussed them above, is assessing the credibility and motive of all witnesses. This is done by questioning, fact-finding, and analysis of written statements and interviews, checking for consistency between different people who have contacted them in reporting the events or different events. So they're cross-checking between reporters in an attempt to determine the consistency and credibility of the allegations. AOB is affirmatively reaching out to family members, close confidants, and staff to test the validity of the allegations. Again, the CRT provided an olive branch with names of over 100 individuals in those groups in order to assist them in obtaining this information. And to our knowledge, anyone from this list who agreed to participate has been questioned about the veracity of the claims made and the circumstances described. The goal, again, partial investigation, no conclusions will be drawn by an olive branch until the investigation is complete. And in order to preserve the independence of the investigation, as Satnam Singh discussed, it's not being run internally by the SSSC or the CRT, as that would not be considered an independent and or unbiased investigation. Witnesses have been asked to report their evidence confidentially to an olive branch, and because olive branch is the only entity doing an investigation, and to avoid undermining and prejudicing the investigation, none of our organizations will be seeking or hearing evidence. Everything is being processed through the independent outside investigator in order to maintain the unbiased nature of the investigation. It's anticipated that the final report from an olive branch will be given to the Gursant Singh Subcorp and the collaborative response team in July, but it may take longer due to the large volume of contacts that an olive branch has received. Then after the report has been received from an olive branch, it will be released publicly to the community. So the standard that an olive branch has been asked to use in its role as independent fact finders is to make a finding for each allegation as to whether it is more likely than not that the alleged conduct occurred. So if you're familiar with the criminal standard of beyond a reasonable doubt, this is a lower standard. More likely than not is not as rigorous or high a level as beyond a reasonable doubt. And so the issuance of the report will mark the end of the investigation and participation by an olive branch, and then our organizations will engage the entire community as we move forward together following the issuance of the report. And so part of the process of moving forward will be our organizations responding appropriately after the investigation. We're working to envision opportunities for our organizations to evolve as we move forward. We're setting up systems to listen to the voices of our global community and our next generation. And Atmakar is now going to talk about, Atma and Hargai, about the listening tour to open a space for deep listening in the community as we all process the allegation and the report from the investigation. Sana.
Thank you. Yes, so as we've mentioned, the format today is really just an opportunity for you to ask questions, for us to answer them. We don't really have an opportunity to hear directly from our community, but that is exactly what the goal of the listening tour is. So with the listening tour, the idea is to set up a series of small community calls. These will be in small private groups where we'll really have a chance to hear directly from you on your thoughts as we move forward as an organization, as a community. This will allow people to kind of process through some of their own emotions if they're having them, and also give us an opportunity to hear where our community is really at. So if you've been wondering where you can share your thoughts about the future of 3HO and the whole global community, that's exactly what the listening tour is. So we will be sending out an invitation to everyone who is registered for these Q&A calls by email, most likely next week, with an invitation for how you can sign up for one of these calls and how you can participate. So keep an eye out for that. And if you are attending our e-solstice this Saturday, we will also be having a session on Saturday afternoon Mountain Time, so that might be different depending on where in the world you're calling in from. But it's called the Moving Forward session, and we will share this presentation that we've given here again, and we will talk in a little more detail about what you can expect from the listening tour. So if you want to hear more details, you can also register for the e-solstice and come to that.
Thank you, Harirai. On your screen is a set of email addresses that anyone can use to get in touch with us regarding either the CRT process, the listening tour, or the team that's focused on next generation issues. And we're happy to answer questions that come in through any of these channels. So that concludes the presentation. We can now move into the Q&A portion of this session. And as Harirai mentioned, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom to ask your questions. So currently there are no questions in the queue. Okay, so now we've got some. Just give us a second to digest these questions. So there's a question about the number of individuals who have made accusations, and so just to be clear, CRT has received statistical information from an olive branch regarding the number of contacts they have received. However, we don't know the details beyond that. So it's general statistical information and general information about sort of like the nature of the contacts, whether they're sort of reporters of harm, or supporters of the reporters of harm, or supporters of Yogi Bhajan, or people who are presenting refuting or presenting information that tends to refute or rebut the allegations. So the 300 number in the presentation represents the number of contacts that an olive branch has received as reported to CRT by an olive branch. The 100 names that was mentioned, I believe that that's a reference to the information that CRT provided to an olive branch, and so it does not represent 100 individuals who have accused Yogi Bhajan of misconduct. These are individuals who, because of their close proximity to Yogi Bhajan over a period of years, may have information that's relevant to the allegations, and so their information was provided to an olive branch so that an olive branch could reach out to them in conducting their investigative work. So thank you for that question. So there's another question asking about the next generation group, and so the next generation group. I think the question is asking sort of about what work is being done in support of the next generation generation. And so there is a team within the Serious Inside Corporation that's working on addressing concerns raised by members of the next generation. And so following the publication of Pamela Dyson's book, among the different conversations that were happening and that continue to happen on Facebook and other places was a conversation about and among next gen members of the community, and about experiences that members of the community had, or growing up in this community, or stories and experiences that have been shared, and some of them difficult experiences. And so part of the work that's being done now is to open a space for those experiences to be acknowledged and heard, and for means of support to be sort of identified and provided to the next generation. And that work is ongoing, and it will continue to develop as we move ahead. So there's another question that kind of relates to the next gen reports of harm, and really I think the thing to understand about the work focused on the next generation is that it is intended to open up a space for people to share their experiences that have been discussed at sort of individual and sort of peer-to-peer level for many years, and that are now being more openly discussed and addressed. So I'll read the next questions. So in considering, and then maybe Prapalkar, you could weigh in on this. In considering the damaged reputation to YB, is 3HO considering rebranding the organization for the future of Kundalini Yoga? If so, what are the target dates? Are we giving thought to rewriting references in books, including heavy references to Yogi Bhajan and his numerous images? And I understand that Yogi Bhajan is not yet found guilty until proven, and that he cannot give his side of the story, so communication is key here. How does 3HO plan to keep us updated going forward? Prapalkar, is that a question that you would like to weigh in on?
Yes, that would be great.
Thank you.
So, Satnam, everyone. I might not know all of you. I wasn't able to join. I was a few minutes late, but I'm Executive Director of 3HO's, so I welcome and am very grateful for all of you being here today. So those are very good questions that you've posed. And 3HO doesn't have plans to make immediate change, because obviously, like all of you, we are waiting until the report is released and completed and also released. And in moving forward, what we are looking to do is to really get your input so that 3HO can move forward in the best way possible, that will, continue to allow us as a community to weigh in on decisions and look at these decisions again collectively. And the 3HO board of directors and all of our staff, again, are really hoping that you all will join us in the moving forward and the listening tour, so that we can, again, decide together as a community how we move forward. I will share with you something exciting, and that is in September of this year, 3HO will be having a new website that'll be launched. So we are looking at the question of branding. That's a good question. And again, we want to dialogue with the community about the best way forward as we brand and perhaps do some rebranding of 3HO into the future. So thank you for that question. And I really hope you'll all join the listening tour and moving forward tour to be a part of those decisions.
Thank you, Prapalkar. So there's another question. Once the report is released by an olive branch, would it be released in full to the community to read? If so, how long after the date of issuance would it be released? And so yes, the intention is that the report will be released promptly after it is complete. So there's a question about the provenance of the practice and its lineage, and yes, we acknowledge that those questions have been raised in different ways. The investigation will not cover that. The investigation is solely focused on allegations of sexual misconduct by Yogi Bhajan. So there's a question. It was mentioned that the report would include whether or not YB is complicit. How is the option of not believing the individuals who have come forward with allegations even an option? So that's it's a good question. This investigation raises some challenging issues. So number one, Yogi Bhajan, passed away many years ago, and so in a typical investigation, the subject of the investigation would have an opportunity to respond to the allegations. So in this case, and I think the question really goes to the standard that an olive branch is using, which, as Amarkar described, is more likely than not. So the question is, whether it is more likely than not that a particular allegation is true. And so I don't know that it will come down to. I mean, we'll see when we have the report, but I don't think it will come down to a question of believing or not believing. It will come down to a question of how the information presented to an olive branch, stacks up, so to speak. And so, where you have information being provided by people who are reporting harm and information that may corroborate those reports of harm, and that will need to be weighed against whatever types of information or evidence is provided, sort of on the other side of that scale. So there's a question: Is there a group moving us forward into the Aquarian age more fully, no matter the outcome of the investigation, and change is occurring? We must be active in moving forward openly. And I would welcome any of the other panelists to respond to this, but I think the answer is yes. There is a group moving forward into the Aquarian age more fully, and I think that's the work of the listening tour.
Yeah, I would like to weigh in on that as well. So this is a great question, and one of the reasons we have established the listening tour and the moving forward piece is because we know how vital it is in Aquarian consciousness to not move forward from decisions just being made from the top down. That it's very, very important that we listen to the collective wisdom, because you all are 3HO. We are not just those of us who are staff. We are not 3HO. You really are 3HO, the community of all of the members of 3HO around the world. So this is part of what we really want to strive for in our moving forward and listening tour. And I think I can also really speak for KRI on that, but I don't have direct knowledge of that. But, this is a time when we want to serve the world more fully. We want to dedicate much more of what we do towards serving the needs of the times, being nimble, and being able to respond in a very conscious way to, again, the needs of this Aquarian age. So what we need for that, again, is your voice, your leadership, and your help.
Thank you for Paul Carr. There's a question regarding the allegations against Yogi Bhajan individually versus the community and organization. And so I'll do the best I can to answer that question. As I mentioned, the investigation by an olive branch is focused solely on allegations of sexual misconduct by Yogi Bhajan. As an organization, we are aware that there are concerns about other aspects of our organizations and our communities, and whether there are other issues that need to be explored, and other aspects of our community need to be examined. And so, what I would say is that we are in a moment of introspection and transparency, and that the organizations are working towards looking at our systems that are in place, and looking at our processes, and looking at our history, and we expect to do the work of evaluating everything that we need to evaluate, and coming to terms with everything that we may need to examine about our organization and about our history to move more fully into the Aquarian age. So there's a follow-up question about the provenance of the practice and the teachings, and the point is that if the point of the question is, as I read it, is that if the investigation doesn't cover the integrity and provenance of the practice, then surely we're missing the whole point. And so, and again, I can make an effort to respond to that, and would welcome other panelists to weigh in. Again, an olive branch's work is focused specifically on the allegations against Yogi Bhajan, and as the data has shown that we've shared, they've received a lot of input, a lot of reports, and so their work needs to be focused and specific on the allegations. As far as the questions around the integrity of the teachings, that's a separate issue, but it's an issue that the organizations are aware of, and my expectation is that whatever needs to be done to look into those concerns and to evaluate those concerns will be done by the organizations.
Satnam Singh, I think that's so true, and that this work will be looked at more deeply by both KRI and in particular KRI, but also 3HO, and that will be part of the moving forward and listening tour, those discussions, because again, we want to move forward with transparency, with openness, and also being able to have each person, really, really go inside of themselves and dig deep about what your questions are, what your concerns are, so that we can, again, dialogue together more fully. Today, our talk is much more about the actual work that an olive branch is doing and the question of the investigation, but having all your questions is very great this time, so that we can also make sure that's deeply covered in the listening tour and moving forward.
Currently, there are no questions in queue. We can wait, and one has just come in. Prabhakar, would you like to address that question as well?
Yeah, Laura, I think that's a great question of 3HO being, are we willing to look at how the aspect of the teachings that, so often we say Kundalini Yoga as taught by Yogi Bhajan, or what came from him and what sources these actual teachings came from. I think that's a really good question, and again, it's something we are, looking at. We're open. We want to not in any way, shut out any of those questions and any of those explorations. So I can't give you a full response to that now, but it is something that we want your voice on. One of the things that is also being done that is very exciting and very overdue is that KRI, for example, is looking deeply into and working on a rewrite of the Level 1 Teacher Training Manual. And in all of the work that we are doing at 3HO as well, we're really looking at deeper, really also very deeply into the why we do certain practices and the scientific evidence behind certain practices. So this is, a challenge moment for us, but also an opportunity for us. And someone is asking about registering for upcoming webinars. So we do have more Q&As coming up. I'll let Hari Rai talk about that, and then I'll let Hari Rai talk a little bit about maybe answer your question about other webinars.
Sure, I just typed in a response actually, but we will be sending out an email to everyone who registered for this or any of the other Q&A calls with more information about how to sign up for a listening tour call. That will be coming most likely next week. And of course, if you're interested in doing additional Q&A calls, you're welcome to come to as many of these as you'd like. We've got 2 more scheduled for next week, and you can find the full schedule of them on the original page where you signed up for this call. I'll put the link in the text box for people, but if you also find the original email where you sign up for this, you'll see the full list of Q&A calls.
And if you are interested in the rewrite of the Level 1 manual, you can actually email, I can put in it's Amrit Singh, I don't know his email exactly, but if you go on Kundalini Research Institute, you can email their customer service or email their CEO directly, Amrit Singh.
There's a question asking, what is the issue regarding the provenance of the teachings? And I can describe the issue as best as I understand it. From what I know, the issue has been raised primarily, and he may be the only one, I'm just not sure, by an academic named Philip DeSleep, who wrote an article some years ago in an academic journal, and who has given some webinars recently, raising questions as to the historical narrative that Yogi Bhajan has I guess the historical narrative. So let me back up. So my understanding is that Mr. DeSleep has questioned the accuracy of the historical narrative surrounding how Yogi Bhajan, became a master of kundalini yoga, and so he has a number of theories as to how Yogi Bhajan developed knowledge around yoga, and he questions whether the story that Yogi Bhajan had often told was in fact correct. So that's that's sort of my understanding of Philip DeSleep's work. There may be other questions. There may be other questions that have been raised out there, but that's how I understand it. I hope that helps to answer the question.
So I know there's, right now there are no other open questions, but again, I want to emphasize to you that 3HO again is hosting a very exciting event in a few days, which is an e-solstice. It actually will begin on Friday, and we do have a section in that e-solstice on Saturday afternoon from 4 to 5:30 Mountain Time, where we will also be doing this presentation again with more Q&A. So, Satnam Singh, I think I can get part of this.
Okay.
If you want to answer this, I'm happy for you to.
Sure. So it's a question about stripping YB out of the teachings. Question is, does that mean that we delete all of his words, lectures, etc., or will we still use them but remove him as the author? I know the outcome of the investigation may greatly influence his answer, and so my response, and really this I think is it's more of a KRI question, but I don't think that we're certainly not there yet, I guess is what I would say, and I think the results of the investigation will have a lot to say about how that question ultimately can be answered, but at this point, I'd say that it's really too soon to say, at least from my perspective, about whether whether and to what extent that type of work, specifically the work of stripping Yogi Bhajan from the teachings, will happen.
So there's a question about the e-summit, e-solstice. We apologize that you have not received your link or schedule as yet. We're working as fast as we can, actually, to complete the website. So please check your inbox later today and tomorrow, because you will be receiving a link to the website, which will give you the full schedule. And we will, again, it should be in your inbox later today or tomorrow. But if you have further questions, you can email me. You can email yoga.info@3ho.org.
yes, thank you all again for attending today. I hope we were able to answer some of the questions that you have. Once again, if you are attending the solstice this weekend, you can join our Saturday session for Moving Forward to find out more details about the upcoming listening tour. And we will be sending out more information next week to everyone who's registered for the call, so that you can sign up for a listening tour session. Those will be small groups that are facilitated by someone, so that we have a kind of a more intimate space to share with each other and feel like it's a safe space to share whatever we need to share without wondering who else is on the call. So we're looking forward to that, and we'll send out more information soon. So,
And
thank you very much. Wherever you are, please have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate your voice, your questions, and you. So please continue to join us as we move forward together.
Thank you all.
Thank you.